Guys, this is my first YouTube video. I'm not going to get into a model right now because I'm pretty much in the middle of finishing up one, and I'm kind of started on one that it's not going to go very well, and I've already kind of started it too. So just to get my channel started, so I have some videos going on, I'm just going to do some airbrush, kind of teaching how to take them apart. I'm not really going to do reviews on them this far, but I have a few airbrushes I'll be able to show you guys. And yeah, so this is, as the title will say, this is the Badger 150 airbrush. It was my first airbrush I ever got. It's a pretty versatile airbrush. It is a gravity feed, so I guess that can be looked at as a downside in the hobby I'm in, which for some of you might be scale modeling, some of you it might be art. I don't know. And obviously airbrushes are used for tons of other different applications. But you have your detachable, I think it's 1/4 ounce, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what these hold, but you have your color cup. And then you can have, this is the upside of a gravity feed, is you can put large containers on it to spray large volumes of paint, which you wouldn't really be spraying large colors of model color paints, but maybe, craft paints, or, say you were doing, I'm not really sure if you're painting something large. I mean, you're not going to, even for a tank like this, you're not going to need a jar of paint. You're going to need maybe a cup or two. But what that does is, these bottom feed airbrushes are better for base coating. If you're going to base coat, like if you do minifigures or something, if you're base coating, a handful, 40, 50 minifigures, you're going to want to use a large jar instead of having to use something like a gravity feed or using the cup, because obviously you're going to have to refill it more, and if you just do this, you're just going to go and just get to spraying, do all your figures, you'll be fine. But what that also does is it requires higher PSI or bar. I'm pretty sure everybody else uses bar besides the US. It requires higher pressure to get the paint up, because it has to siphon it up from there all the way through and then out, as opposed to a gravity feed airbrush, which gravity pulls everything down and out of the brush. So what that does is you can't work at as low pressures as you'd like. So this isn't the best detailing brush, but you can do camouflages and stuff with it. But getting pencil lines isn't really realistic with this, because you're going to have to be spraying 18 to 20 psi, with a gravity feed airbrush you can get down to 10, 15. So you have to move a lot faster, and it gets a little bit dangerous because you're getting a lot of paint coming out. So I'm just going to show you how to break it down. It's pretty simple. I have one of the older styles, so mine's going to be a bit different. I actually just polished the trigger, so it's just a little bit better. I might order a different spray regulator, so I can grind this one down to make it more similar to the Badger 105, so I can get closer to things with it. And I'm going to order a Badger 105 trigger, because I put my 105 trigger in it, made it a lot better. So first thing you're going to do is your handle just screws right on, so it's not a reverse thread or anything, it just comes right out. So you have your handle comes off. Then your next step would be to unscrew your needle chuck, which is the very end. And on new ones this will look slightly different, but it's all arranged in the same order. So you're going to unscrew your needle chuck, set that aside. The next thing, depress the trigger and you can just pull the needle right out. There's your needle. Now be very careful not to bend this or to fold this tip over or anything, because you'll get funky spray patterns, and it might get to the point where you can't, if you bend it while it's in there, you can't even pull it out of the brush. So it just causes problems. Now you want this whole tension assembly. There's a lot of threads on this, so it takes a little while, because you have to undo all these small brass threads, and I believe that's why they went to I'd imagine it's made out of the same material as the rest of the brush on the new ones, because these are brass. That's a lot easier to cross thread them, and if you cross thread it, you pretty much ruin the brush, or at least this part and the threads in there, so pretty much the brush. Now I'll get into breaking this down further in a moment. On this one, you'll be able to pull the trigger right out of the top, and on the later ones there's a groove cut in the top up here. So you can pull your trigger lever right out. But on this one, I just have to let it fall out of the back. Now your next step would be to start dismantling the front end of it up here. So you're just going to take this entire assembly and unscrew it. Now if you have one coming from the factory, it might be factory tightened, but they do give you a wrench to unscrew this. So you just unscrew that. Now this is your body, and I've set that to the side. This is the body of the airbrush broke down as far as you're going to need to do it for cleaning. This does come out, this whole air assembly, but you're really not going to need to touch that ever. So just kind of leave it alone. So your body's completely disassembled. Now, to disassemble this, which this is your whole head assembly, you'll notice back here on these threads, there's I believe these are the Teflon ones, I'm not 100% sure. You pull your washer off, which that's a very small little washer. Put that on the tip of my finger and show you two there. Oh, it just fell off, but they usually give you one or two when you get it. And then this is your spray regulator. You'll be able to twist that right off the top. And then there's your spray regulator and your head. So that's the head of the airbrush completely disassembled. Now, for your tension tube, or I'm not exactly sure. It provides the tension for the trigger. There's a small. It looks just like one assembly, but this very back piece does unscrew, and it was very difficult for mine. So you might have to get a little, you might have to pull it a lot harder than you would normally with it your first time. But of course, this is speaking for the old ones. Now this whole tube will lift out. Set this to the side, and then you'll be able to separate this spring from the shank. Or I believe that's what it's, sorry. I'm just teaching you how to do it. Now, you'll be able to see all the parts to the airbrush. It breaks down to about that many parts. It's fairly simple. Some stuff does break down more, but you're not going to need to do that. Sorry, I just knocked my camera. You're not going to need to do that. Like this brass tip right up in here, you probably won't be able to see that very well. Does unscrew, but you don't really need to do that. The head assemblies are $5 themselves, so if that breaks, just go ahead and buy a new head assembly. It's a lot easier. Now to restart, you have to never forget that to put your washer back onto the threads on the head, because it'll cause your brush to pulse and it'll just cut on and off and cause weird spray patterns. I actually did that when I first got this brush, which this was passed down to me from my dad. He gave it to my mom when she was going into graphic art, so that's why this is an older one. I think they probably got this in the 80s, but I'm really the only one who uses it. So, and then you just thread your spray regulator back onto the tip, onto your head. Now your next step will be to drop your trigger in, and you need to have the hole running along up and down the brush so the needle can pass through. And you set that right in. Your next part, which I didn't think ahead, this is going to be quite a bit different from the ones that they have now. You can drop this right down the top because there's a slot cut and it has a handle, but for mine I have to get something, kind of wedge it up in that and put it down into the brush and then kind of drop it in there. So it takes, I'm sure you all want to watch me do this. But you just drop it right off in there to get off the cotton swab. There we go. Now set this aside somewhere where nothing's going to fall out of it. Go right here. And trigger fell out. Okay, whatever. I'll go ahead and do this. What you're going to do is you're assembling your needle, or not your needle, your tube, shank, tension, whatever. You drop that back in from the back all the way to the front and make sure it lines up and comes through. And then your spring goes right back on it. Just like that. You push that down in. And then you go ahead and screw this down. And then you'll have your tube return spring thing. So sorry, I gotta put this back in again, but this time I wasn't thinking that I would have to set that down while I reassembled the tube. So I'll go ahead and drop that down off in there. Oh man, this video is gonna suck, I can tell already. Sorry, I keep messing up. I hate doing this, that's why I want to get a new 150, but with all the other ones I have. Okay, if I don't do it this time, I'm just gonna freak out. Okay, then you screw your tube shank back into the body, and remember, don't cross thread it, because like I said, they'll ruin the base of this entire brush, and there's a lot of threads, so don't rush it. Just get this screwed back in. That's your primary concern, just to make sure it goes in correctly. And you'll start to notice that your tube will start backing out when you're getting close, because that's putting tension up on the trigger lever, the trigger, and this is what actually springs your trigger back forward and causes that tension. Now, your next step will be to put the needle back in the brush, which be careful here again. I always push the trigger down. Like I said, I'm not sure if you're supposed to. It just seems to go in easier if you do. Once your trigger's in, you'll take your needle chuck and go ahead and put that and snug it down. You don't have to get, super tight with everything. Then your grip goes back on, and then you're done. That's all there is to stripping the 150 down. So I know it wasn't the best video, but I figured it would at least show how to do it. So look forward to I should have some model videos coming out. I'm gonna go ahead and buy a cheap kit and do a complete walkthrough of it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna brush it or airbrush it or what yet, but that's all, guys. I'm out.